Okay, so with these expectations, there's going to be disagreement by somebody at some point. We are all sinners, yes, but we're also human. And like we've said, we see things differently, we do things differently, we have opinions, we have preferences. So, what happens when that comes? Paul, what are your thoughts on those disagreements?
Well, the New York Yankees just this year changed their long-standing rule. You were never allowed to have a goatee. You could only have a mustache if you play for the New York Yankees. They just changed that this year. And
Wow,
so I know it's a
this is
big
big
deal.
news.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I look at, areas of disagreement. I wonder how many of those players chafed under that. And so I'm gonna give a story. How much do I have time for a brief story?
Sure, sure. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
This year, I mentioned earlier in a conversation with Miss Jenny that Illinois sent something down that said you can't require any type of hairstyle if you want to be a recognized school in Illinois. And so we had some students who brought that and said, "Look, this is what we want." And so we were faced with, what are we going to do? Well, it got a little more intense because um, one of these guys was one of our best ball players. And so first game of the year, we said, "Hey, if you want to play, this is kind of our expectation." And he said, "I'm not playing." Well, all of a sudden, it was almost like a protest. Multiple students were jumping in line. So well, that's not what we wanted. And so, um, what we did was we brought his family in, and his family was wonderful family. They just thought it was racist to have any kind of expectation. And, DEI and wokeism and this kind of stuff is, I think, is not right. And here we can say there's no embarrassment. It's not right. So what we decided to do was ask him what he thought would be right. And we invited him and his father. I said, "Look, would you help me make a rule then whereby we could have some standard? But when you get down to it, there's no expectation that will ever please anyone." And so what I did was I said, "So this is what we've got to do. First off, let's just talk about how we're going to disagree." And I think most people don't know how to biblically disagree.
That's correct. Yeah, that's often the heart of the issue.
And then I have to, as a disciple maker, kind of put it into their lives and say,
Right.
this is, if you don't like things, this is kind of how we're going to do it. So we actually have an expectation, and we call it our rule book, whatever it is, that if you get online and start hammering us, you know, it's probably not the place for us. And they didn't do that, but I didn't want protesting. I just said this. I said, if your son is going to start protesting, I said, I don't know that we have a workable solution, but if we can have a way that we can interact on this. And so I think the first thing is you got to talk and love. And if you pull out that rule book, I don't know in any situation in parenting or in relationships or pastoring that ever works. When you were a principal, did that experience? If you just sat down and talked, it seems like a really good place to begin.
Oh, yeah, communication was a key, and often when they came in not liking something, just finding out what brought about that rule or why we have it or how we can work together, and you know what? We're not perfect, and sometimes we just had to say, "Okay, you know what? Maybe we do need to reconsider that and look at it," but so often the case was, "Let's just talk about it, let me explain a little bit. This is not something personal. This is not meant at you. This is what brought this about, or this is what this accomplishes," and often it was like, "Okay, we get it. No, maybe not their preference, maybe not my preference either." But just talking it through, communicating, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people are willing to do that. I
No.
think I think they want to yank out the rule and say, "Hey, here it is." It's easier.
Yeah,
And by the way, that's often how people live their Christian life. I got these 5 rules, I kept them. So
right.
therefore, and I just think that's not how it works. And so I've got to be
Yeah.
humble enough and invest the time to have a conversation.
Yeah, I think it comes in defensiveness plays into that too, because often now these days, where do parents go? They go to Facebook or they go to Instagram and they're posting everything they don't like. And it's kind of, it puts us on the defensive a little because they haven't come talk to us. And then, we're going to have to take the step to talk to them. And that's tricky when it's on social media and not to you directly. And, it kind of, boy, that human nature just gets in there, right? Even we as leadership have to fight that and just knowing, okay, what is God honoring? What is the right way to handle this? And just initiating a sit down and talk and put down the defenses and just talk with them. It's hard to do. It's easy to talk about, but it is hard to do. We know that. Brought to you by BJU Press.